Hey, how are you? My name's Felt, and welcome to Destiny 2, a game that I typically don't make content on. However, this is something that I've been wanting to do for a while. I'm actually someone who enjoys Destiny 2 quite a bit. I've been playing the game for a very, very long time, and even if I do have tons of complaints that you'll hear me talk about on streams and in other videos that I've made before, it's a franchise that's near and dear to my heart because I've made tons of great friends through it and I've had tons of fun playing it over the years. This is this type of video that I've been wanting to make on this game for a very long time. A video about how the game feels right now. Is it worth it to play? Why do I still play it? And just a general overview of how the current state of the game. And I felt like Witch Queen was a really good time to make this video. This is where I typically throw up like some stats, be like, I've played this much, I have all this stuff. But really all you need to know is that I'm a very avid player. I've done multiple day 1 raids, I've done multiple day 1 clears of raids, done multiple flawless raids, solo flawless dungeons. I am probably in the 1% of the player base for this game. So, with my braggadocious intro out of the way, let's hop into it. Okay, so, quick cuts, you're going to see them a lot. This is a bit of a new thing. I normally don't record videos in Destiny. I usually record in 14, so apologies if I'm screwing anything up. And as I'm sure you're realizing, these are very live, scripted, unscripted videos. And by that I mean, I have a script next to me that I'm reading off of, however I do not follow it word for word because I feel like I'm able to convey my feelings better, just kind of vibing it. That'll lead to flub-ups from time to time. It's fine. Don't worry about it. We're all human around here. At least I hope so. So, this video, I'm really hoping I stick to the title because otherwise this part of the video is going to sound really silly. This is about Destiny 2 and the time of the Witch Queen. The Witch Queen expansion, that is, not the character. That's a whole other thing. I will preface, from here on out, this is your catch-all spoiler warning. If you are not caught up in Destiny 2, story-wise, with the current expansion and have done everything available to you, do not watch this video. I will have no qualms saying spoilers all the way down. With that in mind, stuff I'm going to talk about: Legendary Campaign as a whole, the story, the power grind, new guns, crafting, the new seasonal activity, Void 3.0, mostly from a hunter point of view, because that's really the only class I'm playing at the moment, and I'm probably going to play in the future, but we'll see. And just an overall, is it worth it? Do I recommend you to get into Destiny 2 right now? Do I think that this is a game that anyone can play and enjoy, the same way that I can recommend games like Final Fantasy XIV to everybody? Well, with my second half of my intro done and out of the way, let's jump into it. So let's start by talking about the Legendary Campaign, something that I thought actually hit it out of the park, and I'm on this menu with all of its crap because that way I can click on the Legendary Campaign and show it off. So, let's talk really quick about what it was and how they made it difficult. So the Legendary Campaign was the campaign, but harder. The biggest thing is that you always had your power capped. Your power would never go higher than the amount that they give you. For the first mission, it was 1350. For the last mission, it's 1485, and you will never be able to outpower that. You could underpower that, as I had to do several times throughout my story campaign because I would just get unlucky. However, you will never be able to overpower it. I gotta take a break to drink water. Hydration do be important. So, what did I think of the Legendary Campaign? Did I think it was good? Did I think it was fun? Let's get all through all of that nonsense, I suppose. Now, you heard my braggadocious intro. I solo dungeons. I've done solo flawless of them. I used to solo flawless Nightfalls back in D1. I've soloed a few Nightfalls here in D2. I'm a consistent raider who's gotten 30 plus clears, probably, of just about every raid that's out at this point in the game. I generally hunt out harder content. So this content is clearly made with me in mind. So how did I feel about it? It was dope as hell. I absolutely loved it. I don't know how it feels on a second run through, because I've only done it the one time. I feel like on a second run through, because of having access to more guns, and having your build be more or less set in stone as you level, as opposed to sometimes having to swap things out on the fly on your first playthrough, it's probably going to be easier the second time around. I also don't know how it feels with a team, because I played it solo. However, it stopped me quite a few times. There's quite a few missions where I really had to play around what the game was throwing at me. I had to use my invis to my advantage as a hunter here. And it was pretty time consuming. It took me the entire first day I played the game. I want to say there was only like 6 to 8 hours of playtime total though. But it was still a sizable time investment. It was a lot longer than the typical campaign is for Destiny, which is usually like 2 to 4 hours max, even the more lengthy ones. I thought it was a great success. I think this is something they really need to keep doing going forwards. And The only thing that I could say to maybe make it harder is as the later missions go on, maybe add even more modifiers, because as you can see, the modifiers didn't really change. It's basically galvanized, fire pit, empath, chaff, metal, legendary, except for this one. The ghosts mission has something else apparently. I'm saying, why does that have empath and the rest of them don't? Weird things you didn't notice the first time through, I suppose. As you can see, these videos are live. But regardless, there wasn't really much change up in the campaign missions and what they had. Something that I'd like to have seen is by the end, there to be champions. I think champions are a really interesting way to spice up content as far as Destiny 2 is concerned. It's something that people have to deal with, especially if you're power locked. I think that'd be something to kind of look into. I know people aren't the biggest fan of champions because it really locks your loadout, and especially in a leveling environment, you don't really want to be locked into certain guns. However, I think it could be an interesting idea. But who knows? I'm not the one who makes the game. The bottom line, though, is I thought Legendary Campaign was great, and if they don't do this in every single campaign going forwards, I think they're making a very, very large mistake. It was that good to me. Okay, let's talk about the story now. I talked about the campaign itself and the gameplay experience. Let's talk about the story experience that goes alongside that. Now, I'm really not the biggest Destiny 2 lore nerd, and while I do think they set up a great universe, I've always thought the story was lacking. Very, very much lacking. Overall opinion, it was okay. I think it was one of the better stories that they've done, one of the better stories that they've pulled off. But I think they tried a little too hard to do something very different and shove a whole lot of new ideas at us really, really fast that only really resolved in the very final mission to have an actual resolution to the story. As someone who's now played through it several times, I can't even remember the order in which events were occurring. Maybe that's just due to the campaign length. Comparing this to a game like Final Fantasy XIV, even speedrunning, skipping everything in Final Fantasy XIV through the story, it's still like 8 hours, probably. This was like... Actually, I can't even say 8 hours, it's probably more like 12. This is like 6, probably. It's not super long. Problem is, you don't really go faster on your subsequent playthroughs. I'd personally say that they should add an option to skip the actual story part of the story, but that's another thing entirely. Let's get back to actually talking about the story. Spoiler warning again. I'm going to be name-dropping stuff that happens. Alright, so we find out that Savathun's been tricked by the Deep and the Worms, and was actually originally going to be given the light along with the rest of the Hive. Wow, crazy, cool. Who gives a fuck? I'm not gonna lie, I couldn't really care less about that. We know so little about the Traveler and why it does what it does, and why it gives the light to what it does, that it's just impossible to really care. Oh, it would have given it to another race? Cool. It already tried to give it to the Fall, and that kind of worked out. I guess Hive were next on the list, right before humanity. Whatever. I don't really know how that works. The Hive's tricked her, and the trickster queen herself got tricked. That was kind of neat. I kind of liked it. But then, like, out of nowhere, I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't completely out of nowhere. They name-dropped him the entire time of the Witness, the Witness, the Witness. But, like, we never heard about him before now. And so kind of out of nowhere, he's just like, yeah, I'm here, bitches. And he gets, like, a post-campaign cutscene, but, like, they didn't make me care about him at all other than name-dropping him a bunch. I don't know. Maybe I'm in the minority here. Maybe I am the weird one for thinking the story was rather lacking, when a lot of people seem to think this is one of the better ones they've done. I think it was a great cinematic experience. It was much more akin to watching like a mini-series or or like a season of a TV show or something than it was akin to playing a game, which is good and bad. Good, because that means that they're doing better with the writing and that I'm comparing it to TV and not comparing it to, I don't know, a soap opera. Bad in that it's not a game, and games can tell stories in very unique, interesting, and different ways. I apologize to anyone out there who doesn't like Final Fantasy XIV or be constantly comparing it, but Endwalker does stuff that is very hard to do in a medium that's not a game, because your actions are impacting things in a different way than they would by you just watching something take place. You taking your time through a piece of content makes it feel different than if you just went through it breakneck pace, as opposed to Destiny, where it feels like they tell the story at their pace, and you going faster or slower or exploring the side stuff or learning more about the world doesn't really change the outcome. This is all just my opinion, my feelings. I think it's okay. I think it's a good sight, better than a lot of the other stories we've gotten. However, it still leaves a lot to be desired, IMO. Alright, let's talk about the power grind. The power grind is still the power grind. Every one of these yellow dots you see on my map, that's a powerful or a pinnacle drive you can get. I'm on my warlock at the moment, who hasn't really done anything for the week, so I can show off most of it. Spoilers, I guess. There's stuff like building reputation with a vendor, there's stuff like doing your altars or reflections, weekly story missions, defend the wellspring, an exotic quest that you can redo on the weekly, yada yada yada. There's a million things. The tower is still chocked to the brim with all these random powerfuls that give you a ton of bright dust, and yet the grind still kinda sucks. We've had the most amount of powerfuls we've ever had, probably the most amount of pinnacles we've ever had, and yet simultaneously, because of the way that you physically cannot guarantee a slot to drop, an actual particular slot, like I cannot, no matter what I do, I cannot make the game give me a kinetic. It's just not going to happen. I cannot make the game give me a class item. It just won't happen. No matter what I do, the game will not forcibly give me any of those slots, no matter what. And that still feels really freaking bad. It's by far one of the worst parts about the power grind. There's no deterministic loot in this game. You never have a choice about what you get. You just gotta hope that you eventually get the right thing, which just doesn't feel very good. Now, I will say, there were some plus sides this time around. You already heard a few of them. There's more powerfuls and pinnacles than ever. They're a bit easier to get than ever, and for better or worse. And they did give you a really solid head start. If you did the legendary campaign, if you grouped up with friends or pushed yourself through it solo, they did give you a head start of 20 power into the powerful tier. They gave you armor that was 1520, which is 20 power towards the 1550 mark. Because to get from 1500 to 1550, you needed only powerfuls. Pinnacles would also boost you, but you needed powerful drops to get from 1500 to 1550. If you did the legendary campaign, they give you a 20 power head start on that, which is really nice. It do be worthless on alternate characters because of the way that power leveling goes in this game, but that's an entirely other conversation that falls into the category of leveling is still kind of bad. The fact that I can throw over a set of 1550 guns and boost my warlock's power by literally 100 or so, kind of crazy. I'm not really going to complain, but it does make doing the legend campaign multiple times an absolute waste of time. Speaking of things that feel like an absolute waste of time, the grind itself, it feels incredibly tedious. There's lack of dupe protection, there's lack of choice, it feels incredibly inconsistent. And that's just a really bad feeling in a game that has a massive insistence on making you gear up and get new armor and new weapons. Not being able to choose any of that still feels really bad, and it's still something that I have a big problem with as far as this game is concerned. Let's talk about new guns. Now, this section is also going to partially include crafting, so this is going to be labeled as the guns/crafting section in the video. I do apologize for combining them, but I can't really talk about one without the other, in my opinion. Let's start by talking about the exotics. I guess spoiler warnings again. I can't say it every time in case you see something, but this is a very spoiler-filled video because it's new content. First exotic, new heavy weapon, part of an exotic quest chain following the campaign. The Parasite. It's Savathun's worm, but we put it in a gun. There's an ornament for it that looks kind of cool. So that's kind of neat. Looks a little heavy. But that's beside the point. Let's talk about the worm. So the way that the worm works is it fires a giant hive worm with very, 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 very low velocity and a huge arc to it. That explodes for like 300,000 damage when you stack the perk properly. Otherwise, it's like a third of that. So how does that work? Well, when you have the worm stored and are getting killed with other weapons, the worm gets bigger and better. Up to 20 stacks of its perk, meaning you need to get 20. Yeah, personally, you, hope you like fighting with your teammates for kills, but personally you need 20 kills with the Parasite to get max stacks. It's a cool idea, it's a cool mechanic, but I'm just not the biggest fan of it. It does have a cool cyclical nature to its thing, because its other perk is Worm Byproduct, which is if you take damage from your own worm, which you will at max stacks, it gives you a damage buff for a little bit of time, make it easier to get those stacks back. It's a cool idea. It's got a nice cycle to it. It goes in circles over and over and over again. Stack worm, shoot worm, stack worm, shoot worm. Very fun in casual content, and high-end content, it has some uses. Unfortunately, depending on you personally getting the kills can cause some problems, because in 6-man content and raids, there's very low chances you're getting 20 kills in a row before you need to blow something up. It's possible, but it's kind of unlikely. Good, not the greatest thing they've done. Fun exotic heavy, though. Speaking of other exotics that we've gotten, I clicked the wrong one, but the Osteostriga. It's a gun that you get through the crafting system. This is why weapons and crafting have to be combined. I'll try and put a little divider, if I can, when I swap to talking about crafting, but no promises. The Osteostriga is a crafted exotic SMG that is basically Thorn on steroids. It fires tons of little pellets that are all poisonous, that poison their targets on hit, and they automatically explode in a poison cloud when the opponent dies. If it dies to the poison, not the bullets, the poison. The poison, not the bullets. Very important. You get extra ammo, which stacks a lot. Up to like 100 rounds. This thing has like 28 by default with tac mag. It stacks really high. It's really cool. It was a really interesting way to introduce people to crafting. A really interesting way to make people want to craft. It seems a little overtuned at the moment, but I can't really be mad because it's such a fun gun that works incredibly well in specific situations that I just really, really like. Alright, let's talk about the other guns that we have access to. I'm going to go to my collections page and show off the Throne World weapons that I am not the greatest fan of. They're all craftable, which is cool. Unfortunately, that means you need to get deep side resonances over and over and over and over and over again. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm glad you asked. You need two patterns to get the auto rifle, which means you need to complete 2 deep sight resonant auto rifles, which is not a 100% drop rate by any stretch of the imagination. 3 for the bow. 3 for the scout rifle. Where? Grenade launcher, I believe is 2. It is 3 for the sniper rifle as well, but you just need to... I'm going to leave the deep sight resonance part alone for a bit. I'll try and make a solid cut, and then I can talk about crafting a deep sight, and there's a whole other section. Regardless, they're all craftable weapons. They're all pretty cool. They can all be made to be exactly what you want for them to be. Throne World weapons have some pretty interesting sights to them. They're kind of fun. They're kind of cool. There is also an entire other set of weapons that exist this season that are based around the new PsyOps activity, which I'll get to at the end of the video. It's a pretty short section because the seasonal activity is going to keep going, but I still want to talk about it a little bit. PsyOps weapons do have some cool, unique stuff, like the Explosive Personality Grenade Launcher. It's another Waveframe, my favorites. Stuff like this coming back is good. Alright, there is... Oh, goodness. Well, I took it out of my inventory because Suppressing Glaive is being turned off for the raid. But glaives are a whole thing. Let's talk about glaives right quick. They're cool, they're fun, but they're the epitome of mediocre. If you're not using mods that show off the pure strength of glaives to the highest degree, they're probably just going to feel bad. They're not the worst things in the world, they're not the best things in the world, they're just kind of there. Overall, though, I do think the guns are successful. I do think they're new, unique, and different. There's also quite a few new world drops, including some cool new Suros weapons like the Fugue. All in all, pretty solid as far as guns go. The new crafting system, which I'm about to get into in a second. I will cut the video, I remembered. These are all live, can't you tell? Overall, I'd say the guns are good. The new exotics that I've gotten experience with are pretty cool. There's a new set of exotic glaives that are coming out that I don't have yet because they're not out yet. I might make a video on those when they do come out, but no promises. Let's get into crafting. Oh, you ready for a rant? I do not like crafting. But I do, but I don't. Let's talk about the basics. How do you shape a weapon? Well, you come in here, you choose the gun, you're like, alright, well, I choose a perk. I choose a perk, I choose a perk, I choose a perk, I choose a perk. Bam, craftable weapon. And you might be like, what about all these fancy perks that are like stronger? You have to level up the gun after you've already crafted it as a bad version of itself. And I do mean bad version. Usually these first sets of perks are not very good. You have to craft the gun as a bad version of itself and then use it for a massive amount of time to get the good version unlocked. Not the best system, but I can kinda get behind it. A big problem is how expensive stuff is. Now, there is a fix on the way for Ascendant Alloys. They're not dropping as much as they're supposed to be. So it's kind of cool that we're going to get an upped drop rate of those, but like, look at how much neutral element this costs. It costs 2,000 per enhanced perk, and it only costs like 300 for a normal perk. I spent 2,000 earlier today crafting up my SMG for the raid because I wanted to make sure that my SMG was as good as I could personally get it at the time, while still grinding out as much other stuff that I needed to. So I got enhanced swashbuckler so I could get damage boosted and stay damage boosted as long as possible. It cost 2,000 of that material to do this. Do you have any idea how many guns 2,000 material is? It's like 10. It's like 10 guns that have dropped as deep sight. It's a lot. And speaking of guns dropping as deep sight, the only way to unlock their freaking craftable versions is to farm the gun itself, which, if you heard my power grinding section, loot is not very deterministic in this game. It is very hard to get what you need. And, on top of that, if you do get these things to drop, there's not a guarantee it's a deep sight. I farmed probably 5 to 6 hours one day alone to get 2 deep-sighted come-to-passes. That 5 to 6 hours was without leaving the activity, and I think I got lucky to get them that fast. I have yet to even see the sniper rifle drop. And as for other guns that I enjoy, I've been absolutely farming explosive personality like crazy, as best as I can, and I've gotten one of the probably 10 explosive personalities that I've seen drop in this game has been Deep Sight Resonant. I don't mind that you need to get Deep Sight Resonant versions of the weapons, however, maybe make them a little easier to get. It shouldn't be 1 every 10, it should be 1 every 2. If it's going to be such a hard requirement for me to be able to craft my perfect version of a gun, that I need to get the gun 17 times, I'll probably just settle for a version that I found out in the world. Case in point, this thing is 99% of what I want out of an explosive personality. Do I even bother to invest into the weapon crafting system if I've already gotten a perfect one? Do I really care? This thing is almost exactly what I want. Reload speed masterwork with stats for all and frenzy, meaning that I have the most insane reload speed of all time, and a perma damage buff once we get in combat. Why would I want one that just says something fancy like, oh, you have a weapon level on it. Oh, you can eventually equip a memento socket for cosmetics and trackers. It's a cool, neat idea, but at base level it is way too grindy to be enjoyable to the average player. I'm probably not going to commit as much to this game as a lot of other players will. A lot of other players will find grinding for craftable weapons to be super fun and entertaining. I hope it's a system they refine and keep using in the future, but by God, the Deep Sight Resonance system? Kinda crap. Spoilers for the raid. I'm recording this before the raid is out, but these guns, we have no other idea where they could come from. There appear to be a set of guns in here that are completely differently designed, that look like they could only come from the raid. Looks like you're going to need 5 Deep Sight Resonant versions of each gun. If that's not a 100% drop chance for them to be Deep Sight Resonant, people are going to be upset. Because there's, like, no way to effectively farm them other than just do raids until you want to cry. Which is just not super fun. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully it's really easy to get Deep Sight Resonant weapons, but the Deep Sight Resonance system is something that I think needs a pretty solid change going forwards. At the time of making this video, it needs help. This section is just really quickly about PsyOps Battlegrounds. It's cool, it's fun, the weapons are neat, the seasonal activity is okay. However, I feel like seasonal activity isn't really what this video is mostly about. I just wanted to briefly include it because it does tie into the main story of the Witch Queen. So it is kind of part of the package, so to speak. I think it's good and fun. I think it's interesting. I don't think I know enough about it because we don't have all the versions yet, and I don't think we have the master version, so we don't really get to evaluate it in its purest form as of right now. All right, let's talk about the Void 3.0 here. Man. When they get building right, they get building right. They did it with Stasis, and they've done it again with Void. Void 3.0, the like total rework from the ground up, giving you like all these abilities and options, aspects and options, as well as fragments. Oh my god, it's so good right now. It has so much stuff going for it. If nothing else, the new Mobius Quiver being so much stronger than the old one is really, really nice. Being able to just have massive damage as well as a great neutral game with powerful grenades, being able to dodge to invis, and then giving you invis and true sight all the time. Oh, it's really nice. It's really cool to be able to expand a build and craft out a build that is my niche, my playstyle, my personal choice, you know? And the fragments are amazing. I actually wrote a lot of this stuff before the second set of fragments came out. The second set's even better. Now, keep in mind, there's some stuff that you like might not want to run all the time. Like, Echo of Undermining is actually not good if you're going to use your tethered to DPS with. Because right now, Grenade Weakening and Tether Weakening don't stack. And Tether being stronger doesn't always work. It's mostly when comboed with Divinity, where the Weaken from the Grenade might overwrite your Divinity. But like, it's just something to keep in mind that you don't always want to run Echo of Undermining. Just going to throw that out there as a little tidbit in this video. It might get fixed in the future, and if it is by the time this video comes out, well, congrats. Just use your grenades willy-nilly. Man, they're just so good, though. I love the fragment system. I love the aspect systems. Being able to, like, just really hone in on what makes a class, and just have fun playing it. Now, this is actually the hunter that I contest mode rated on in terms of builds, both well mods and armor mod builds, which... while nothing super fancy, it's stuff like Volatile Flow, Font of Might, Well Tenacity, Weeping Wellmaker, and Seeking Wells. The bigger star here was my aspects, being able to dodge to vanish, being able to see through walls after killing something to give myself invis, and having my void abilities cause stuff to explode, my lingering void grenades lasting forever, my invis lasting longer, and echoes being able to weaken sometimes, and other times it was... I can't find it, I apologize. Echo of Reprisal, where Final Blows when surrounded gave super energy, which could be really useful in some of the more hectic encounters. Now, when I did contest mode raid, we ended up having me swap to Nighthawk for just raw DPS burst on the boss, because as good as Mobius Quiver is, you are locked in animations for quite a bit, and that is just less time that you get to shoot something. Be it an Izanagi's Burden and a Threaded Needle, or a Sleeper Simulant and a Succession. Regardless of what it was, it gave you more time to shoot guns, and shooting guns inside of a well will often result in generally more DPS than using a super. Mobius Quiver with Orpheus Rigs is great and super usable and something that you should definitely look into having in your build and your repertoire. However, Nighthawk is just faster burst, and if you're trying to burn something down super quick, Nighthawk will still be the way to go, as great as Void 3.0 is. There's also some really great stuff that I've gotten to experience with Warlock, which I'll be talking about in a second. There'll probably be a video cut for me to talk about it. I will say, I don't really like Void 3.0 on Titan. At the time of making this video, I don't know if I haven't figured it out, or if it's just not my style of play, but I just really don't like it, and I would rather play Thunder Crash or Solar Hammers. That's just my opinion. Now, Void Warlock here is also equally great. You do have some weird, like, tiny problems where, like, Child of the Old Gods will do the weakening thing, but if nothing else, you have Devour and you have powerful grenades. And I've been using a very powerful build that is all about causing stuff to explode, better duration on abilities, and then that granting more super energy, and sometimes doing stuff that will give me volatile rounds to my weapons. This is something I've been toying around with on Warlock. I don't have it honed in quite yet, I don't believe, to where I can really make the build work out and stick together. But there is potential for a very powerful build where you run super high uptime Devour with really high discipline to throw grenades constantly and just have more or less 100% uptime on volatile rounds. I've been using something a little different at the moment, and I've even been using Boots of the Assembler on Devour because I think it works out really well. However, use what you like. I just think Void 2.0 is really great and a really strong showing for Bungie on reworking an old subclass to be new and fresh. Alright, as we start winding down through the ends of this video, let's talk about the raid. Now, I don't have any gameplay that I'm going to put here. This is just going to be me talking over the screen, maybe showing off a gun or two. So minor spoilers for the raid. There's already tons of spoilers out there anyways. As you can see, I am part of the illustrious few who completed within the first 24 hours. Emblem evidence and all that. So let's talk about it. How was the raid? How does this tie into how Destiny feels as a game at the moment? And why is there an entire specific section dedicated to the raid? Alright, let's start with how hard it was. On contest mode, on day one, it was very, very difficult. I'd rate it as probably a tad harder to execute on than, say, Deepstone Crypt. In my opinion, it is probably a tad harder to execute on than Deepstone Crypt was, because that was the last contest mode raid that I did. It has some really unique and interesting mechanics. It explains itself pretty well, as long as you don't miss obvious things, like a compass knight hiding in a corner of the map that you never explored because you didn't think they'd shove something over there. But it's really good. I think it's one of the best raids they've done in quite a bit. I think, as a fact, they really just blew me away. I think they did a wonderful job with it. I think all the boss fights, both of them, were in fact so meaty, unique, and good that the raid's just fine only having 2 bosses. The other encounters were also quite fun and interesting. I'd say the very first encounter, the true first encounter that gives loot, it's probably the weakest of the raid, but it does a really great job setting up mechanics, setting up symbols as an idea, and showing off how you're supposed to be dealing with the raid as you go forwards. I'd say my personal favorite is the final boss. I think the final boss is wonderfully put together. We may have overthought the mechanics at the time, but it was still very, very good. Overall, I think this is probably the best raid they've done to date, and I hope that they somehow find a way to top it in the future. Let's talk about the weapons and about the crafting for the weapons. So the weapons are all super unique, interesting, and cool. We can even go show off the entire collection of raid gear. This is already in game. It's not like I'm spoiling you, I promise. So these are all the raid weapons. You get a glaive, a kinetic SMG, a heavy linear fusion, a energy pulse, an energy waveframe grenade launcher, and then a kinetic stasis fusion rifle. Very cool, very unique, very interesting weapons. They have their own really cool intrinsic perk that will in fact heal you as you kill enemies, if this gun will load. You gain health based on the number of hits before reloading. It can be a pretty solid burst of healing, or it can be pretty minimal. Regardless of how much you do, it is hits, not kills. So as long as you are actively using these weapons, they will still heal you a little bit, which can be kind of useful in a pinch if you just need to panic reload something just to try and get a little extra health as you run away. I think they just did a wonderful job with the design aesthetics of all the stuff. However, I will say, we're going to come back to weapon crafting here, they left a little to be desired. As per usual, the only way to be able to craft these weapons is by getting deep sight patterns going for them. For example, the weapon that I want to craft the most is the grenade launcher. However, I can only guarantee that I will get one a week. I've gotten very lucky, and I've already gotten a, I believe I've gotten a spare? Or have I gotten a spare glaive? I think I've gotten a spare glaive. Either way, what I've gotten doesn't matter. What does matter is that you can only guarantee get the deep sight you want 1 time per week. The first time you clear the raid, the first weapon that you buy will be a guaranteed deep sight weapon, which means you will need to level it up, and then get rid of the deep sight resonance, and that will progress your patterns. And you have to do that 5 times. Like I said, the problem is, though, you need to get the deep sight weapon, and you can only guarantee it once per week per account. Not per character, once per week per account. So it takes 5 weeks, if you're really unlucky, to get the deep sighted weapon you want craftable. Which kind of sucks. Now, bonus chests in the raid, loot drops themselves, give a bonus deep sight weapon. If you do a little puzzle once per week, you will in fact get an extra bonus deep sighted weapon. So you can guaranteed get 2 deep sighted weapons per week. Guaranteed. Like, you will 100% be able to get 2 deep sighted weapons per week, but only one of them is your personal choice. So it's, in my opinion, kind of a 50-50 on how I feel about it. I like that they're giving us more control and more easy access towards getting these weapons, and they're making it a little easier to guaranteed get deep sights after a certain amount of time, but I still think crafting needs some help. And I will say I'm very concerned, because now that the weapons have become unclassified in the API, we can see that there are adept versions of the weapons, which will probably be coming from the master mode of the raid. My concern is that if I already have a crafted gun, why should I use that over the Master Mode ones? The Master Mode ones can take Adept mods, including things like Adept Big Ones, which is just straight up better than boss spec. So why would I use my crafted, honed, finalized gun over a random one that is pretty good if I would not be able to use said Adept weapons on them? Who knows? There is a system for crafted weapons. I believe I have one on me here to show it off, where you can slot something called a memento, which are optional consumables that grant unique cosmetics and trackers. My hope is that there will be a memento that you get that you can slot exclusively into the raid weapons that will make it so that the raid weapons that you have crafted and tediously put together over a long period of time will be just as good as their adept counterparts. Now, that might be a bit of a copium pipe dream for myself. However, that's my hope. Overall, though, I do think the raid was great. I do think they did a very good job with it. I think the weapons and systems that are coming out of it are pretty good. I think they pushed a little too hard on making you have to do it, quote-unquote have to do it, every single week for, like, probably a few months to get all the loot you want. But that's pretty standard for Destiny anyway, so it doesn't hurt me too badly. And here we are at the end of the video. This is a very long video, but I really wanted to put how I feel about the game right now down in words, so that if anyone asks me, why do you still play Destiny? If you have all these problems with it, I can reference this video. I love this game. I think it's incredibly fun to play. I think very few games out there give me the sense of enjoyment that this one does. The way that the guns shoot, the way that the loot works, the way that it feels so satisfying to clear a raid on the first day with the game kicking your teeth in, literally and figuratively. I think it's a hard game to beat. I think that it is got its fair share of problems, but I think that it's great. And if you'd ask me, how is Destiny 2 in the time of Witch Queen, I'd say it's the best it's ever fucking been. And on that note, that's time to end the video. So thanks for hanging out and watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it wasn't too poorly put together. This is a bit of a passion piece for myself. I don't expect too many people to watch it all the way through for all probably 30 plus minutes. But if you enjoyed it, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe and leave a comment talking about it, or just leave a comment saying how you think I'm wrong. That's also cool too. Anything to drive the algorithm, am I right? Either way, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to catch you in the next one.